Hi, I'm Victoria Alexander, the owner of Realty Collective. I started this company 19 years ago to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate and make it an easier process to engage in real estate practices in New York City. I'm your therapist, your matchmaker, your sounding board, whatever you need to help you facilitate your goals around real estate and prepare you for the wild roller coaster, emotional roller coaster that is the buying and selling process. And I've literally, my job is to guide you with almost my 20 years of experience to make sure that you avoid pitfalls and avoid getting in your own way when going through this process. And for buying, I can talk a little bit about commissions. That's been a hot topic these days, but I'll get into it during the presentation. So I'm just going to introduce you to we are the three people you need to be a buyer and to make a transaction happen. You need an attorney and a mortgage professional, unless you're all cash, which good for you if you are. And so I'm going to introduce Amy. Michelle, why don't you go first and introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Tepper. I'm a real estate attorney. I specialize in New York City, so Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, but really those three the most, the Bronx a little bit, not as much Staten Island, but only residential real estate. I know the ins, the outs, the ups, the downs, the backwards, the forwards. It's a whole other beast. If you've bought real estate in any other place in the country, it is nothing like New York. So don't assume you understand it. In fact, we're still always figuring it out as well, but that's what we're here for. I've been practicing for over 20 years. And just like Victoria said, we're part on your team. We're also part therapist. This is a huge process for you, especially buying your first place. If that's what you're doing, we are here to listen. We're here to talk through things. So feel free to reach out to us with any questions. And even during the process, once you're going into the contract, you should never have a question that's unanswered. The point is that we're approachable. We're here to help you. And we want this to be a smooth and happy process for you. That's it.
Great. You want to take it away, Amy, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Amy Ruiz. I work with Citizens Bank. I do home mortgages, so I am doing residential lending in 1 to 4 unit properties. 95% of my business is based in New York, but I do lend nationwide. Mostly I am doing Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens, but I do reach into the outer boroughs and Jersey and Connecticut on occasion. Brooklyn is actually my favorite place to be buying and selling just because it's so active there. There's lots of great new properties, new development. I do a ton of new development, so I'm very well versed in that if that's what you're interested in buying. I do lots of first-time home buyer loans and also scale the ladder into jumbo loans and those sorts of things if that's what you're looking into. As Michelle said, even if you've purchased elsewhere, if you're buying in New York, you are basically a first-time home buyer all over again. But I'm here to walk you through the process and answer all of your questions, help you understand from A to Z what the financing looks like, qualifying, figuring out backup plans, and what to do, because there's no such thing as a simple deal, as I'm sure Victoria and Michelle will attest to. There's no such thing as a simple deal. So just always being ready, being prepared, and having backup plans for how things unfold. So yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you so much for having us, Victoria.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And it's so true. Best laid plans always, but I think it's really important to have foresight and understand what those pitfalls can be and navigate around them and have the experience to navigate through them. And that's why you want, one of the things I always say is you want to pick people that are seasoned. It's always great. Oh, my cousin just got their real estate license. Oh, my cousin's or my uncle's a lawyer. He does divorce law, but he could do this for me. You want experts in this particular field, and you want people that have been doing this a long time, because a part of working with your team is having the years of institutional knowledge that they have from doing transactions on a daily basis. So you're just not going to get that if you pick the real estate agent that just got their license or the mortgage broker or lawyer that just got into the field a year or two ago. They're just not going to have done enough transactions to know that this or this is how this can be derailed. Because our job is to really guide you through the process. So you want seasoned experts to be able to do that for you, but they also want to make sure that you like these people, that you can take advice from them, and that they're the right personality type. I think that you want to feel like you're going to be spending a lot of time with all of us. And so you should actually enjoy having conversations and talking to us and feel comfortable being totally open about your about the experience and what you need from it, how you want to be communicated to. Some people like email, some people like text message, some people like WhatsApp, some people like Signal. Talking to us about, do you want a phone call? That kind of things is setting boundaries and expectations off the gate so that we can do the best job serving you. And because that is what we're all doing is a service. And our service is to provide you with an experience that is least stressful as possible, because New York City real estate is stressful, but we have done it so many times that we're trying to eliminate. We've done a great job at eliminating all the things that could make it more stressful and make this a smooth transaction for you. And so this workshop was really designed to help you understand from A to Z the buying process. It is not comprehensive. We cannot go over everything in the 45 minutes, that 50 minutes that we have left, but it is a jumping off point for you to start understanding where to get started in this process. I say I'm on, and we want you to feel empowered and educated, because like I said, this is the biggest investment you'll ever make. And we're just going to give you the basics. But these are the 3 people that you're going to need. And I like to call them your dream team. And we like it when we know each other. You want to pick somebody off of my lawyer list or my mortgage broker list, because I have a rapport and relationship with them, and I can be more frank and direct and hold them accountable, instead of you picking somebody that we've never worked together. There's just synergy, and it helps avoid things being miscommunicated. Was it you, Michelle, or somebody else that was like arguing just via email over the contract signing stuff? And I was like, oh God, this is all going to blow up. But then, because the lawyers had worked together before, it cooled down really easily and it didn't become such a big thing. So I think that those are really important parts. And that's why you want to pick a lawyer that's been in the industry a long time, because they know all the other lawyers. They're used to be like, oh, it's always great. We're like, oh, looking forward to doing a transaction with you again, because this is what they do every day. And so the lawyers that are good at this, that get more repeat business, are doing multiple transactions with each other, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, sometimes yearly, but they're definitely speaking on a regular basis. And so having that rapport is important. Was usually talking about what my job is as a buyer's broker, but I feel like I've been talking now for a while. So I'm just going to skip to why buy now. So why buy now? You're planning on staying in New York City, and you shouldn't be renting if you're planning on staying here at least for 5 years. Rent is so high. It's been coming down slightly in Brooklyn, but not enough to really make the numbers make sense. If you think about, if you've been renting for the last 10 years, all of that money that you will never see again, think about if it was put towards equity, and part of it being towards your principal payment on a property. And then you get to then make it your own and not worry about painting the walls or making long-term improvements, because you own it and you can make it exactly how you need it to be. And just thinking about these long-term investments in your future quality of life and your future finances. Interest rates are still a little bit on the higher side, but I always talk about when I first started doing real estate, interest rates were around 8%. So they're not that high in comparison to the last 20-year spectrum that I've been on. So just think about that in the long term. And then the interest rates we saw during COVID were historic, and what's the right word for it? Like, they're never going to happen again. I don't think
It was a once in a lifetime. Honestly, it was a once in a lifetime.
It was a weird blip on the radar kind of thing. So those are the reasons to buy now. I always say, if you are in the position to buy something and you're staying in New York City, do it as soon as you possibly can. Delaying only costs you long term. You're losing the equity in rent. You're losing the opportunity to buy something that when other people are outside of the market. So I think that a lot of people have been hesitant, but Michelle and I were just talking about, people were really waiting to get over this election. And I was in Mexico and I had 4 deals all of a sudden just come into play out of nowhere. So I think that people are realizing that the waiting is over and it's time to get back in there. So you should be doing that too. Next slide is about just understanding the finances. We have a rent to buy matrix to help you figure out if you should buy. There are some people that live in rent stabilized or rent controlled apartments. Those are probably the opportunities where you should hold on to those as long as possible. But if you want a financial picture of it, this matrix helps you really break those numbers down. And it's from the New York Times. So the first thing that people like to go and do is go look on the internet. And that is not the first thing you do. The first thing you do is assemble your team. And usually that first call is someone to me, like your buyer's broker, because you got referred or you saw my name somewhere or you took this class. But your first phone call always is to your mortgage professional to figure out, get your pre-approval and understand your buying power. It's always stressful for everybody when somebody calls me, I just went to an open house. what do I want to put in an offer? And the first thing I have to do is like, okay, do you have your pre-approval? And they don't. And so that keeps them from actually being competitive and puts them one step behind all the other buyers that were at the open house. So the first call is to your mortgage professional to figure out what your buying power is. So why don't you tell us a little bit, Amy, about what the first call is, how to get the pre-approval, what sort of questions you'll ask them, and all about the financing aspect of it, especially if you're self-employed. What does that look like for people?
Yeah, I was gonna say that is one of my number one questions. So thank you. Okay, so when you call me because you have been given my name and you need a pre-approval letter, you're interested in putting in an offer, at least like starting your search, you need to define your budget, right? Defining your budget is square one. You might have a number in mind, but it's really important to look at your total picture comprehensively. So what you're going to do is I have in my email, and I'll actually put it in the chat, an application link. It takes about 10 minutes. You go through and it will ask you like normal stuff like your date of birth, social security, so we can pull credit. We're looking at your FICO score. We are looking at your income. When it comes to income, we're looking at a couple different things. Are you a salaried employee? Are you paid hourly? Does your compensation involve a bonus, overtime, commission? All of those things are weighted differently than base pay. Are you self-employed? If you're self-employed, that is going to look very different. You need to have been self-employed for at least 2 years in order for that to be qualifying income. You can't have started something, even if it's really successful, if you started something like a year ago, that's going to be considered way too new and high risk to be able for someone to lend. So having that 2-year history is really important, or to be able to apply with someone who has income. That way you're not having to rely on that self-employed income. For borrowers who have a salaried job or just a normal base pay sort of job, you are looking at a 2-year history. If you don't have that because say you were in school or were on maternity leave or whatever the case might be, that is okay. It just needs to be documented, and then an exception will be made for that. Like I said, we were looking at, so a lot of times when people are putting in, they're putting in like what they expect to get for a bonus this year. That's awesome, but it hasn't landed yet. Can't count it. We're looking back at 2-year historical bonus. If you've only received bonus for 1 year, you can't use that as qualifying income. So these are just like really important details, because you have your budget and what's coming into your account, but then when it comes to actually qualifying in your purchasing power, these are really important details that you wouldn't know unless you've done this before. And so having a mortgage broker look at that income and calculate it and tell you what your true purchasing power with the bank is going to be is really important. Another thing that's really important is looking at the assets, making sure that we've got enough cash to close, that we have enough reserves. Your reserves are what the bank looks at to make sure that after you have made your down payment, that you have enough money, say in hardship, you lose a job, something like that, have a medical event, that you have money that you can fall back on to pay the mortgage. So the amount of reserves that you are going to need is going to vary depending on how much you're putting down, depending on actually your pay type. So when you have more than 50% variable income, say you are a server at a restaurant or do some other tipped income job, that's a high variability. You can have great months. You can have like months that are really tough or slower in your business. It tends to be more seasonal. So those sorts of things are all taken into account, and you have to have more reserves when it comes to that. So it's not just about, do I have enough money to close? You have to look at that comprehensively. Knowing that gifts can come from family members, and family members only, is really important when you're planning. If you know that you're going to buy in the next 6 months, and you can deposit those funds from an unmarried spouse who's not purchasing, or excuse me, an unmarried spouse, listen to me, an unmarried partner who's not going on title, who's not going on the contract, but they want to contribute. Cool. Move that money over, let it sit for 60 days, and it's considered seasoned. So there are ways around all these different things that can derail a loan if you haven't talked to someone early on in the process. So that's just an example. And yeah, so once, we have all this information, you've given me supporting documentation, I've looked for kind of all the pitfalls and where things could potentially get derailed. We've talked about strategies to mitigate anything that might come up. I'm giving you your pre-approval letter, and then you can go shopping, and everyone will know that you have been verified and vetted, and that make that offer, the bank is going to stand behind you, and that you're a serious buyer. So that is, in a nutshell, the financing process, at least from the beginning.
Yeah, just in the beginning, you want to get that pre-approval in your hand because when we go to look at properties, one, brokers ask if you have that, and two, you need to have that. And it does take usually at least 24, 48 hours, sometimes 72, depending on how complicated your paperwork is. I know with banks, it sometimes could take up to a week. So you want that in hand so it doesn't delay any of your next steps if you are going to put an offer and found something. But and the other person you want to be not scrambling for when you're like, I found the apartment of my dreams is your lawyer. And you want to have called and talked to people and make sure you're like, this is the person I'm putting on the deal sheet. I love her. She's great. She answered all my questions and we feel comfortable moving forward. You don't want to be having to scramble and try to find all these people and also be negotiating a deal because that's what we're doing. We're going back and forth with your offer usually or going to best and final, which is or in stressful in itself, but to also be calling around and looking for your professionals you're going to be working with just as another layer. So locking that down ahead of time, like I said, right out of the gate is important. So Michelle, when people call you to talk about buying and what it looks like to work with you, tell us a little bit about what you ask people and tell them about the process.
So generally, just like Victoria said, it's great when people reach out in advance, but sometimes that's not the case. And they even reach out just when they've got an offer. And they always say, oh, do you have time to work with me? And as attorneys, we are, this is the ebb and flow of our business. We know that we're going to get these calls and that everything needs to move quickly once we come into the process. Of course, we love to have met you before, but either way, once we've connected, I'm going to ask you a little bit about yourself and about the purchase. A couple things that we'd want to know is there anything special about the unit that you're making an offer on that you want me to look for? I'm going to do due diligence on this apartment that you're putting an offer in. And when I'm reading through the board minutes and reading through the financials, is there something specific you want to know? Do you plan to sublet it in a year or two? Is this a building that allows sublets? Do you have a pet? Are you planning to do an inspection? So I get to know you. I also will ask again, just like everyone else, do you have a pre-approval? Have you already spoken to a mortgage broker? We want to know where you are in that stage. Other things we'll talk about is any concerns you have for the future, how long you want to hold the place, lots and lots of questions. It's great when we know each other in advance and I have a spreadsheet all about you so that the minute your offer gets accepted, you get a phone call, yeah, your offer was accepted. The deal sheet can go to the attorney and to the mortgage broker and we can get started. They'll come in a few days, but to the attorneys and we can get started right away on that due diligence. And like I described before, that due diligence process is really deep diving on the building. It's knowing the building's history, financials. Are they about to have major increases? Are they about to put on a new roof? Did they just recently fix the facade? We want to know everything about the history and kind of try to see what we can glean about the future. So you'll know if it's a stable building, if it's going to have increases every year, things of that sort. So we put a lot of time into that. The sooner we can get into that, the sooner we can get you ready for contract. Now, while you have an offer on, and even though it's been accepted, until you've signed the contract, anybody else can come in with a bigger offer or a better offer or a more attractive offer. So the trick is we want to be able to work quickly once you've got an accepted offer. The attorney needs to work quickly for you to get a contract ready and to get due diligence done. But at the same time, you want to pick an attorney who's thorough, who's detail oriented, who's not cutting corners to get that done quickly. It's probably the most critical step is learning everything about the building and putting together the contract. And you want someone in place so we can get started right away so nobody else has time to swoop in. Sum it up.
That sounds about right. So now, after you have gotten your pre-approval and you've figured out who's going to be your lawyer, you've created your team, right? So you have your team of people, including your buyer's broker. I'm going to go back to what your buyer's broker does. I advocate for you. I help you negotiate. And same thing, you want seasoned experts. I have many relationships with other brokers. It's always great when I see a listing that my client wants to put an offer in or wants to go see and say, oh, it's John or Jill or whoever. And we're like, I've done deals with them. So I know what to expect when working with them. And they feel the same way. Just because
I'm hitting that shit. Sorry. No, I'm not doing no trade, bro. First, you get.
There we go. Thanks, Farrah, for removing the bombers. I mean, becoming more and more common again. That was only during COVID that I thought that happened. It's important that you pick somebody that has relationships in the industry and has been doing this a long time and is an expert. We have a lot of guides and resources to help buyers through this process. And I think I said it before, I was going to go back to the commission stuff, which I think that none of us has really talked about, but should be talked about here, just so you're clear, is that there has been some changes because of a law that was passed because there was a lawsuit for commissions for real estate agents. And now cannot be assumed that the seller is paying for the broker's fee. Kwame Manu, I'm going to let you deal with that. I'm like, is it the bomber again that wants to get into this meeting? You should make sure that I lost my train of thought.
Commissions.
Oh yeah, I was
Not
going to.
assume that the seller's paying it.
Yeah, don't assume that the seller's paying it anymore because they changed the rules. But New York City is one of the places that everyone's talking about this and getting very worked up. But New York City is very place that the value of the buyer's broker is very important because we have something called co-ops here and condos. And since this process, that's why we are doing this class, is so complicated and convoluted, you really need the education and expert of a buyer's broker. And sellers recognize that and are willing to pay buyer's broker. I would say since the laws changed, that all the deals I have done have had a commission offered to the buyer's broker deal. But what I say to buyers that are nervous around that is that if there's ever a property where there isn't a commission being offered after get one, we can negotiate into in to the deal and put it in as an offer. You're going to pay Victoria this X amount of money, and this is what we're going to pay for it. And everybody will be in the same position, so you don't have to worry about you not getting picked because of that. Or unless we're not working with a buyer's broker, or if we got through this whole process and the property you love is not doing that, I'm not going to stand in the way of you getting this property. We'll work something out. Or in many cases, but even before this law, I have stepped aside because there are still places like in Canarsie and in Bensonhurst where REBNY, which is the Real Estate Board of New York, hasn't encouraged brokers to be educated about the benefits of working together. There's definitely been always a scarcity mindset when brokers that are small and beholden of their little listings because they don't understand the cooperation actually breeds more abundance. And so I think that in the years past, as I've been doing this now for so long, when there have been deals where the broker stood in the and commission stood in the way of my client getting the property or not, I've said, you know what, I don't need to be part of this transaction and I will support you the best way I can. And hopefully I'll give you enough support. And then when you're ready to sell, we can work together because I'm not going to keep you from getting your dream property just because the seller is stubborn and doesn't want to pay people for their professional services because the real service is to them to make sure their property gets moved off the market. And you need educated buyers to do that. And you can't do that without a buyer's broker unless, this is your job. If you're already a broker, you probably might not need a broker. Now that you have gotten your team together, which is the most important thing, is to figure out some of these things that are going to be guiding your process, right? The timing, the budget, your lifestyle choices, your quality of life, and your future, what your family looks like now and what it'll look like in the future. So asking yourself some hard questions. And like I said before, the timing bit of it, you can start talking to us now, even if you plan on not buying in for a year or 2 years. You want to make sure you're educated so you're putting yourself in a position. I have this deal with Michelle, it's the deal with you that they called me a year ago and had a whole very hard conversation with me. I told them to wait and to put them get themselves in a better position. They talked to a mortgage professional to understand really what I had to do so that they looked good to a bank. And then now a year later, they came back around because they listened to the advice of the experts that were on their team and got themselves ready to buy something. So I think that timing is a big part of this. Don't feel like you need to be ready. We do need to think about if you're in a lease for another 2 years, how you get yourself out of it. And then talking to the mortgage professional about your budget and what you need for your quality of life. Do you need to be by the park? Do you need to buy transportation? Are you working from home? Will that stay like that? Or will you go back to commuting? Like you need to think about long-term solutions. Barry, I can go to the next slide. So once we sort of figured out that, then once we can use those information, we can guide our location and building type and amenities and all those kind of things. We know that you're not going to really be able to find an old co-op pre-war building in Williamsburg because it's all new construction. So the things that come with that need to align with the neighborhood you're looking in. So we think about all the amenities and then the type of property, which is co-op, condo, or 1 to 4 family home. And then there's an extra layer of complexity if it is new construction and coming out of the developer's portfolio right into you that makes things like we need to create a punch list and other complexities around taxes that need to be negotiated to the deal. So those are the things we narrowed down ahead of time so we can educate you properly. Do you want either of you have any new construction deals that are going on now that, are sellers, developers giving incentives to buyers to what do those look like?
I definitely have a few right now. And so typically, just to back up a step, typically sellers in New York pay transfer taxes upon the sale. And so the buyer doesn't pay that. But when there's a new developer, that is shifted to the buyer. So they're paying these sellers transfer taxes. And that's one big thing that you can negotiate. And those are like thousands of dollars. So not every developer goes for it, but I find that a lot of them to get the deal done will pay their own transfer taxes. So something to be educated about, but you also want to understand what those numbers are when you're going to them. And that's where Victoria will educate you, but of course your attorney can explain those things to you as well. There's a couple of other fees. You can also ask the developer to pick up their own attorney's fees, things like that. They try to push everything they can onto a buyer. So buying new development is very different than buying an existing apartment. So definitely want to have those conversations with your team if you're looking at new development.
Yep, I would agree completely with that. There's a lot of back and forth of fees. Don't assume anything. The way that gets negotiated is, it looks totally different than a resale purchase. I would add that there are a couple different things. Timing, I think, is a really big one that I see and that affects my buyers a lot. Is they'll get in a contract and a sponsor is planning on closing in January, and then they don't have their certificate of occupancy. The tax lots haven't been apportioned. So there's all sorts of things that they have to file documents with the Attorney General's office. There's a lot of things that can delay. And I've had something that was supposed to close in April that did not close until September. And managing someone's lock, that expires, and like, how do you do that? How do you do that in a dynamic rate environment? Those sorts of things are things that you're going to want to work with really closely with on your, with your lender, and be prepared for that. And also, like, when, and Victoria, you probably agree, don't plan your move and, cut your lease short and like sublet your place to be out whenever the developer gave you an initial date, because it probably won't land there. So just and that's where you really are working really closely with your team. Michelle is going to be like calling the sponsor's attorney and, hey, how's that TCO coming? When are you giving out your 30-day notices and those sorts of things? It's really important to work together as a team on those new development deals. Super, super critical. But there's just a lot of like extra complexities that you have to think about in terms of the financing and the lock and all those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, you don't usually lock them for a while because of all of that stuff you just said. That's when we're going to close.
Yep, exactly. But knowing the risks of not locking or having a float down lock or special products that can help you navigate that stuff. So there's a lot of different, it's tricky.
And also one of the things about new construction is 50% of the deals need to be in contract before banks will even start closing in that building. So if you're the first one to go into contract, you're going to be waiting a very long time to them to sell, if it's a 200 unit building, another 99 apartments before your apartment will be ready to even be able to get a bank loan. So just something to consider. They do also want to close the all cash people first, because then that helps them get
it helps them get there. And as some banks, my bank will actually, I've done first unit in a building, but it's hard. You have to have a super well qualified buyer, and it takes a lot. It can be done, but it generally, you're looking to hit those pre-sale numbers where at least 50% are in contract. So like you said, it can take a really long time on a jumbo, on a jumbo loan, it can be 30%. So that gives you a little more leeway. But yeah, being one of those first in contract can be really a long road to get to closing.
Also, closing costs are different, right? And I think that we talked about the transfer taxes, but also sometimes developers try to push off their legal fees and other fees, junk fees that they put into the deals. So I would say, I know, Michelle, I always like to say co-ops are for like 1 to 3% closing costs, and condos are 3 to 5, and then new constructions are all over the place, just depending on
Constructions could be here and here.
Yeah.
So that's something also to be prepared of when you're looking for a home, is making sure. I think a lot of people think about the purchase price, but they don't really take into credit like what the monthlies are going to be. So they don't always look at the common charges and condo fees, like what the monthly will be all in to pay for some of these things. So also making sure you are working with somebody to educate you, not just about your purchase price, but are you going to be able to handle that monthly nut with the mortgage and everything, plus the fees associated with it, and then be able to eat. I always say the first year you are house rich and cash poor. And I definitely ate like a lot of ramen and oatmeal. And I even got a roommate, I think, for the first year. But now, thank God I bought my house. The people like it when I tell my house story, but I had to sell. I had to get a check from a car accident. I sold my old engagement ring to come up with the money, and I only did 10% down. So, because you can do 10% down for condos if they're approved, but then in the middle of it, and I had my parents, I think, had a cosign because I own my own business. We were just talking about what happens when you're a first-time home business, and this is 14 years, it'll be 15 years in January that I own my house, thank God. And my mortgage is like way less than I would ever pay for in rent, like probably half at this point of what I would pay for rent-wise. But pulled all this, then they got rid of the product though that I was using to buy my house. And I was like freaking out that I wouldn't be able to find another product with 10% down. And they changed all the things. And then because it took so long, the developer pulled paying for the transfer tax and started being like, oh no, you have to split it with me now because we've been in contract for so long and blah, blah, blah. And it was thank God I had my own broker with Tina in my office talking me through all of this, because I definitely let my emotions get ahead of me and I got very frustrated at certain points of my own deal, because I think it's hard to separate. And that's why you need seasoned, calm, and experts to walk you through this process. So the next part I always like to talk about is like, where do you look? Obviously, people are looking on the internet. Nice thing, I would look at a place that I suggest. I like Street Easy. I think it's very user friendly, but you can also get into our backend database and send you listings on a daily or weekly basis, depending on how aggressive you're being. And then the nice thing that we do is you just tell me when you're going to be available, and we will schedule everything for you and make sure that you just tell us, are you getting there by car or by bike, or how are you, and when are you available, Saturday or Sunday? And these are the properties you want to see. And then I organize everything for you. And if we're in the beginning of the process, I go out there with you and help teach you like what questions to ask. If this is going to be a year-long process, I'm not going to go to every open house with you. I'm always there if you need me, and always happy to go to listings that you think are the right ones. But every Sunday for the next 52 weekends might be a little much. But we figured out, I like to go and see everything on the market, the old and new stuff with on the first weekend you're looking, so that then really gives you like an understanding of what's out there in the market right now and what the market looks like. And then you'll be more self-aware, like looking at things on the internet and realizing what they translate to in reality, so that you don't waste your time seeing things that you aren't going to work. So I think where we talked about, where do you search? Just because something's old, also, I always say, like, if something's been sitting on the market for 30, 60, 90 days, don't assume something's wrong with it. Sometimes those are the best value and deal. Somebody just made a miscalculation on pricing or other missteps throughout the process, and maybe just didn't have the best representation. And those are your opportunities to take advantage of not being in a bidding war, which is still happening, or competitive when we're in a competitive market, or people are pricing things competitively. Bidding war still happens because people still use underpricing things as a marketing strategy. It's pretty simplistic thing to just drive up. And I think when things are volatile like this with high interest rates and low inventory, it's a easy strategy to get the most money for the property. And that's why you need a buyer's broker to help you figure out what the strategy of the seller was, so that you can meet the demand where they're at. And I think that knowing how sellers, brokers think about things is an important way for you for a buyer's agent to help you strategize around getting your offer in and making sure you're competitive. So then what happens? Then we find the place and we make an offer, right? So I need your pre-approval from Amy, and I need your lawyer's information to put in with your offer. This shows that you are competent and educated and ready to go to the other side. If you have blanks in your offer, that always, are they really serious? Because have they done all of their homework that they get assigned to by Victoria? So you want to make sure that your team is ready to go when we're submitting that offer, and that your offer is based in reality, right? I'm giving them a reason that we're offering $10,000 or $20,000 below asking, and they've told us about the things that they know are wrong there, so that we can take into consideration, so it's not coming up on the inspection. These are the sort of things that you want to make sure you understand the market conditions and how to meet where the property is and being marketed at, to make sure you're the winning bid. And sometimes that means offering below or at asking or above asking, but having the experts in your corner to help you figure out what that looks like, so that you're not just shooting blind. And I think that brokers the first thing I always do is call the other broker and say, do you have any other offers, and what information can you give me without violating your fiduciary responsibility to the seller? Because they want to make a transaction. We're all here to make this smooth and to make deals, not to disrupt things. We are solutions based. So when we hit bumps in the road, like the windows don't work in an apartment, like another deal I had with Michelle, we're finding solutions and workarounds so that the client doesn't lose the apartment over a silly, stubborn seller that doesn't want to address an issue that they should, but it's going to be not that much money to fix, and we'll get a number for them to address that. So those are the sort of things that you want to make sure you're prepared to when you're putting an offer. So say we get the offer in, we've negotiated everything, and the deal sheets go out. The deal sheets first are going to go to the lawyer. And so, Michelle, what happens when you get the deal sheet?
Sorry, forgot to hit unmute. So we get the deal sheet, and I think we alluded to this earlier, but the deal sheet is going to be, that's how the lawyers know it's our turn to jump in. So the broker's taking you everywhere, you got your accepted offer, deal sheet comes out, it goes to your attorney and to the other side's attorney, and that's the green light for the lawyers to get started on all the work. First step is going to be doing that due diligence, like we talked about. And what that due diligence entails, like we said earlier, was reading the building financials, reading the building minutes, collecting all the documents like the house rules and you know, the sublet policy and anything we can. But also we send over a questionnaire to the managing agent. And my questionnaire is like a comprehensive 5-page, like over 100 questions, digging into the nitty gritty. And so we want to get that in right away because these managing agents often take 5 to 7 days, sometimes longer even, to get back to us. So we want to get that started right away. While the due diligence is going on, the seller's attorney and the buyer's attorney are also going to be working out your contract. So the seller's attorney drafts the contract and emails it over to me, the buyer's attorney, and I'll mark it up and make changes and then put together a buyer's rider with extra terms to protect you and any additional things that we've talked about. Are they supposed to be giving you an extra lamp? Are they leaving you something? Are they repairing anything? All that fun stuff will go in my rider, and then I'll send that back over to them to mark up. So ideally, the due diligence is being done on one hand and the contract on the other. It's being done simultaneously. So they're both ready about the same time. If things go perfectly well, I could say that's 5 days. Realistically, it's sometimes closer to 7 days. But like I highlighted before, which is so critical, as long as you have not signed the contract, somebody else can come in with a higher offer and the seller can change their mind, even if we've gone 7 days down this road. So we want to work quickly and efficiently, but not cut corners. Assuming that the contract is all good, and I'm going to email you a due diligence report after having done all that due diligence, and you'll go through it and ask me back any questions. What does this mean? What do you think the future holds? Blah, blah, blah. We'll go through all those questions. We'll also go over the contract together and see if you have any questions there or any additions that I miss. Maybe you didn't mention you had a dog. We need to add the dog to the contract. Maybe you didn't mention you had a baby. We should add the baby to the contract. All that stuff. We're going to, fix it up. At that point, you're ready to sign the contract. And what that means is you're going to sign it, but at the same time, you also need to have a 10% deposit available to wire to the seller's attorney. So there's 2 pieces: sign the contract and wire the deposit. Once the seller's attorney has both of those, then and only then will the seller sign the contract. So we need to have all of that done before any other offers come in. Once the seller signs the contract, now we are officially under contract and you're ready to go. And that's when we hand you back over to the rest of the team. That's when you're going to call Amy right away and say, okay, I have a contract. Let's start the loan process. And that's when you're going to call Victoria back and say, let's start the board package and let's get everything ready so that while the loan is getting prepared, the board package is ready. And then you'll get to, submit the package as soon as your loan is ready. And I can keep going, but I think I'll let Amy talk a little bit about the next process with the loan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so once I got a contract, it sets off a similar firestorm like it does with Michelle. So as soon as I get a signed contract, I'm gonna go over rate options. I am also, a lot of times, if I know your attorney, like Michelle, I'm gonna call her and be like, hey, on your questionnaire, how many units are owner occupied? What I'm looking, because that 100+ questionnaire is gonna raise all the lender flags with what programs you're qualifying for. So depending on your debt to income and those sorts of things, I need to know, can this building go in this bucket of products? Can it go in this bucket of products? How do we prevent locking in one and then needing to switch later? Is that even going to work for you and for your ratios? Or so knowing those things and having partners that you've already worked with that you can just call and you know who they are and they're able to answer your questions and give you really important details even before that contract is signed is really critical and is going to help protect you. So once I get that signed contract, we are going to go through pricing, whether or not it's the right time to lock. We are going to order your appraisal. That is where an independent, neutral third party isn't employed by the bank, doesn't have any conflicts of interest. They're going to go and they're going to assess the unit and they're going to say that it is worth over the purchase price, at the purchase price, or under. And then that's going to be what determines the loan to value. So that is an important piece of the whole process. It's always great if it comes in over because then you have more equity into the property. It doesn't change the loan to value because it's whichever is lower of the purchase price or the appraised value. If it's under, then we've got some work to do, right? I might be calling Michelle and say, hey, do we have any recourse here? If not, we've got to figure out how to come up with the extra funds to close the gap so that it doesn't affect your financing. So we order our appraisal. I'm going to go through and I'm going to scrub your file. I'm going to be looking for anything that didn't come up during our initial pre-approval. Like you have wired your contract deposit. I'm going to be sourcing those funds and looking at all of that stuff, scrubbing it up, packaging it, and sending it over to underwriting. And then an underwriter is going to go through your file and they're going to approve the loan with stipulations. So the stipulations are going to be that you have to get that gift from your mom into the bank. You need homeowners insurance. You need to set up your auto pay, things like that. So those are going to come out on your commitment letter, but that is the bank's formal commitment to you. We will make this loan based on these stipulations that you have to fulfill. And those are called conditions. So once that goes, that commitment letter is going to go into your board package that you've been working on with Victoria in tandem with where we've been doing all of our bank stuff. And so I'm going to throw it back to you, Victoria.
I think one step too, though, I wanted to talk about mortgage contingency. Can I do 2 sentences on that?
Do go for it.
So just so some of you guys are aware, when you are buying a place and you have a loan and you make an offer, you're going to say, my offer is contingent on being able to get a mortgage. Obviously, if you don't have all that cash, you don't want to sign a contract that you can't afford in case the loan doesn't go through. So what Amy was talking about is that they're going to call your employer and do the appraisal and make sure that everything looks good about you and the building. And they're going to issue that mortgage commitment letter. If the bank issues a mortgage denial based on like the appraisal or based on they actually called your employer and your employer says, no, that's not the right salary, they didn't, any reasons that they might issue a denial, then if you have a mortgage contingency in the contract, which presumably you do, unless it was a crazy competitive bid, then you'll be able to cancel the contract and get your full 10% of the deposit back. So that's a very important stage. So when you put your offer in, and obviously Victoria would know this, you're going to want to put in an offer as contingent if you're using financing. So that way you have an out clause in case anything is wrong with the loan and you get rejected. You don't have anything at risk here. You get your 10% deposit back and we can cancel the contract. Sorry to interrupt.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. We're just having a conversation here about what all the complexities of getting into contract. And the one thing we also didn't go over is inspection. Your offer is contingent on inspection usually, but it's not a contract term because we do the inspection before you sign the contract. So what we do is we have a list of inspectors. Sometimes I encourage one person over the other based on the property and based on the client. Some people like really a hands-on, thorough guide me. I want to know how all the mechanicals work in my building. Some people are like, just check everything off. I'm an architect. I already know everything. I just want somebody else to say this works. What needs to come working is all of your appliances. So if it has a washer dryer, if it has a dishwasher, all these things need to work. And if they don't work, they need to be working when you close and we do the final walkthrough, which happens before you actually purchase, but after the contract signing. So we do an inspection. And then if we do find some huge things, so say you're buying a 1 to 4 family house and the roof needs to be replaced and they didn't tell us the roof needed to be replaced. Okay, we're going to get an estimate on how much that will cost and we'll negotiate it into the deal if we're in a position to do so. Because maybe there is somebody else chomping at the bit and that we have 5 other offers behind us and there isn't space to do that. So it just depends on reading the room a little bit. We got to figure out how to read the room and know what we can ask for and what we shouldn't ask for. So we do the inspection. If that goes well, that's when then Michelle's doing her due diligence, making sure that the finances and all the things in the building check off, and then we sign the contracts. After you sign the contracts, the first thing you do is get Amy everything that she needs, because we cannot do anything until we get something called the commitment letter. And even if I work on you on a beautiful board package, if the bank doesn't have everything they need and they can't give us the commitment, and so we can't submit your board package because the board package is a contingent on getting the commitment letter. And I have clients that finally picked which mortgage broker they're working with and are ready to get going. And the first thing within the 24 hours is, did you follow up with them and make sure that they ordered the appraisal? Because the first thing the bank does is order the appraisal, because your commitment is a contingent on the appraisal. We just talked about the appraisal contingencies that they were in the deal, but you want to make sure that the bank has everything first, because it has to go through a lot longer process through underwriting than it does for us to get your board package together. Once the bank has everything, then we'll start working on your board package to make you a beautiful board package. And then after it's all together, we wait for the commitment. And if so much time passes, then we have to update your finances in the board package because you didn't get the bank everything they needed, or you picked a mortgage professional that has not been vetted by us. And something called turn times, you want to make sure that their turn times are fast. And that means we get them everything and they can turn the deal around and get your commitment letter very quickly so that we can get your board package in. Because then after that, if it's a co-op, we're doing a board package, we can't just skip right sometimes to the board interview, because we have to send it to the management company who first vets it and then says, oh, we have 2 or 3 weeks to look it over before we send it to the board. Sometimes they don't, though. Sometimes they do it in 24 hours. You never know. And we have to talk to the other broker to understand what the timeline looks like. And then they get it to the board, looks it over, and then they propose times that they could all meet to interview you. And sometimes those interviews are just because that's part of their protocol and they're doing it just because it's part of this project. And then sometimes it actually is a real interview and they will grill you and I will prepare you to get grilled. But it also depends just on the building and the type of board. And if you don't want a very strict board, then maybe that building is not for you. And so that's something we ask ahead of time usually, because if you want to be more relaxed, easygoing people, probably want a relaxed board. So those are usually telling signs of the vibe, and you're gonna have to live with these people. They will only approve you if they think that you're going to be a good shareholder, because they are getting into business with you because they want you to make sure that you're holding value in their property, making sure that you're a good community member and are going to follow the rules. Because when people that don't follow the rules, that's when values go down. If you're letting your dog poop out front all the time and not taking out your garbage and whatever they think is going to drive down the value, or not going to even tell you some of the scenarios that I'm thinking of right now. But they are really judging you to see if you're going to make sure that you can make your payments on time and that you're going to be able to be a good business partner for them and bring the value of the building up and also maintain the building, because you don't want the building to fall down around you, because that's not keeping the value up. You want to make sure that your neighbors and you, this is part of the screening you're doing with your due diligence when Michelle's looking at the finances and stuff. Are they spending their money correctly? Are they going into debt every year? And having to do assessments all the time. Have they redone the roof? Are they doing basic maintenance to make sure that a $500 fix doesn't turn into a $50,000 repair, because they're maintaining the building? Just like you want to maintain the apartment around you and take care of it, you want to make sure that your business partners are maintaining the whole building and doing things to save you money long term. Because assessments, I think, are always a sign sometimes when people are not good at budgeting or not good at maintaining the building. And you have to assess if those things are true or if they've just are doing things backwards, because that's how some people do them. Then we make sure that we get your clear to close. And then, is there anything you want to talk about getting to clear to close while we're in contract, Amy, that you might have missed? Or are we just going to talk about scheduling the closing and then give people some time to answer some questions?
Yeah, I think I went over like kind of the commitment and talked about the conditions that come with it. And those are the conditions. You give them to us. Like I said, the homeowner's insurance, things like that. And those are your conditions to close. You send them to me, we get them cleared by underwriting, and then you are cleared to close. And we are going to go ahead and I'm going to call Michelle and I'm going to call Victoria and be like, hey guys, we're cleared to close. Let's schedule closing. So it's fairly straightforward. It's really a very front end heavy process unless you've got some really wild self-employed with many businesses, kind of stuff like that might drag you down with conditions, but otherwise it's a pretty straightforward process with a well-prepared file. So
yeah, this is when the heavy lifting happens for the word broker and lawyer. A lot of my work is in the beginning and then making this beautiful board package and then prepping you for the board interview to make sure that you just seem like the nicest, sweetest person ever. And they want you as a neighbor so bad. They were like, oh God, how did we get so lucky to have this person? So then once we have the clear to close from after the board says they do want you and you've been accepted to the club, then we work on scheduling the closing, which is usually pretty complicated because it's multiple people's schedule, including the banks. And so just because you have to clear to close doesn't mean you can close the next day. It's a real circus. So then once you have the clear to close, within 24 hours of that, your lawyer is going to then tell you what checks you need to sign up for, bring to the closing with. I know that everybody's, I want to know now how much money I need to get together, but they are doing down to the dollar, your gas charges, your common charges, all these things. And those numbers don't usually come into within 24 hours of the closing. And sometimes it's the morning of the closing. I'm understanding what checks you need to bring to the closing table. And then once that happens, usually the closing should be 45 minutes to 2 hours if it's on the longer side, and your hand will hurt from signing too many things. And then you will get the keys and then you will not move. You will move the next day. Everybody likes to always be like, I scheduled my move the same day as the closing. Do not do that. We have tried so hard to avoid stress in this situation for you. Do not make it stressful by moving on the same day as your closing. You're like, the movers are outside on the van. Can we have the keys yet? It makes it just not fun for you mostly. And for us, then we just feel bad for you. And so then that stresses me out because I always am like, oh God, I'm stressed. You're stressed, so I'm stressed. too much of an empath here. So now that we've gone over all of that whole process, which was a lot of information, and there's so much more that we're not even talking about. And I feel like I've talked so much at you, and I'm so sorry. I just feel like there's so many things that I want to tell you to prepare you for this situation. But don't worry, you're in good hands, and that I'm going to be able to tell you all these things when you give me a call after this, and I don't have to put it all into this meeting. So in conclusion, just reach out to any of us. Happy to make time to talk to you about any of your questions, even if you're not ready to buy and you want to buy in a year or two. Getting prepared and understanding the process and knowing getting your team members lined up is the biggest first step, and the best thing you can do for yourself is preparation. So congratulate yourself for even showing up tonight, and or for watching this video or listening to it in the future to get prepared. We're going to send out this email tomorrow with all of the information that we talked about, the ebook, the recording, our resources. We have a library of resources that on top of the ebook that breaks out every step of the process. So if like we're in contract, you get an email about, and in Basecamp, okay, now what happens that we're in contract? What should you be doing? Like I said, getting everything to the bank so that everything is lined up for you there so that you don't have to go scouring the internet for answers. But you should also just call us because I will answer all of your questions at any point in the process. So look for that email with the updates and anything else, any questions that anybody has, or we're happy to chat about them right now. I don't see any in the chat from earlier in this meeting.
I think to reiterate what Victoria said, I think any of us are happy to answer your questions, even if it's one and you're trying to understand the process. So feel free to shoot us an email or pick up the phone and call us while you're thinking about this, or if we confused you on something tonight or you want more information. I think we're all happy to take a call or an email anytime just to get you guys comfortable and ready for the process.
I will third the motion and just say, yeah, that's like call anytime. This is what we're here for, is to help you prepare. What did they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The more you go into it, having had these conversations that are specific to your own situation and what you want, what you need, what you have to have, the happier and less stressful this whole experience will be for you.
Oh, thanks, Bruce. What's the future of Red Hook? I've lived in Red Hook for 20 years. The future of Red Hook is unknown, but I think that the government, the state and Hotchill is really committed with this $298 million grant to invest in the marine terminal and make sure we have continue to have a working waterfront. Climate change is real, and we just elected a president that doesn't believe in them, and his whole administration is going to defund some of the climate protections that have just put in. So who knows what it'll look like? I cannot predict what the future of Red Hook is like, because all things are in the air right now based on things that are not in my control. So if I had a magic ball, I can tell you. You asked another question. Is having a working waterfront a good thing or a bad thing for Red Hook? It's a good thing. We've always had a working waterfront. It's been disinvested in for the last 40 years. But I think that we will continue to have a port, and we need to continue to have a port. And that's why we got $198 million from the state government, because it provides job and provides a way to keep trucks off of the roads, because one of the problems is we know that the BQE is falling onto itself. And so having a economy that's just based on cars and trucks is something that I think we all see as a future that needs to change. And that's why they've put the Blue Highways Initiative out there. But this is about buying real estate and not just the future of Red Hook. But I think that I love living here, and I think it's one of the best investments I've made, both for quality of life and financially. You're welcome, Bruce. I've been talking about this all day. So Brooklyn Marine Terminal is on one of the top topics that people like talking about. And I'm very informed on what's happening in the different communities around Brooklyn, but specifically Red Hook because I live here. So we can also talk about the Brooklyn Botanical Garden shadow or community board issues, other questions about real estate though, and buying and selling before we take off. And if there aren't any, just reach out to us directly. Sometimes it's hard to ask questions about your own personal situation in a group setting. And okay. I think that's that for tonight. For nobody's popping into the chat there with questions. Thanks, everybody. Really,
Thank you.
and this was super educational. Oh wait, is there a limit? So we got Michelle. Oh, God, jump right in there. Is there a limit to the gift a family member can give?
Nope, I shouldn't say that. That's not necessarily true. On some loan programs, there is a minimum borrower contribution. So if that family member is not co-signing on the loan with you, they're just mom or dad and they're giving you a gift, or your sibling or whatever, on some loan programs, there's no limit. On other loan programs, you have to make a minimum of 1%, 3%, and sometimes 5%. Of your own money that goes into the transaction. So that is going to be specific to you and to your loan program that you qualify for.
Also, there's tax incentives for your family to be giving you gifts. I'm not sure what it'll change in the next couple of years because Trump, I think, raised it under him, and I think that'll happen. Right? I think what is it now? How much can they do tax free as a gift?
I think it's 16 or 18 and I can't remember. So it's not a lot. It's not a lot at all.
It's only,
But
and I remember.
I generally, if we are trying to avoid gift taxes, which a lot of is a concern for a lot of my clients, I will a lot of times have them wire the money directly to the attorney. It doesn't pass through your accounts. It's not, and so it's just they're making a purchase. And so that's a way that a lot of times family members choose to handle it when they're concerned about that.
I see there's another question in the chat that says, moving on to the next topic of how long does it take to close? I'm happy to field some of that. I think it depends on what kind of property you're buying. We talked a lot about new development before, and that could take anywhere from 30 days if the building's really ready and already has a C of O to sometimes up to a year. So new development is that. And then co-op and condo is very different. A condo, if you're closing with all cash, you can close pretty quickly, maybe 20 days or so. If you're closing with mortgage, I'd say 30 to 45 days could be done for a condo.
Yep.
With a
Yep.
co-op, it takes a little bit longer because, as we talked about, you can't even put your board package in to be interviewed until you have that mortgage commitment letter, which takes about 30 to 45 days. Sometimes it's sooner, but let's just give it 30 to 45 days. At that point, you're submitting your board package, which they could review for a week or two before they give you an interview. And then after you get the interview and everything's approved, they still have to draft all the new co-op documents and then give you a closing date. And that takes about another 2 weeks. So I'd say realistically, if you're looking at co-ops, I would budget 75 to 90 days for closing. Can it happen in 60? Yes, I've had plenty close in 60, but I would budget 75 to 90 so you haven't moved out and have nowhere to live and you're sleeping on your friend's couch for a month.
Yeah, that's why I'm always telling people to understand your lock terms, your rate lock for your mortgage, because you don't want to lock too early if you're in a co-op and you know that the co-op is slow and it's going to take 90 days. So that's why there are reasons for delay. And so there's all these little moving parts that you need to strategize around. And that's why it's important to have seasoned experts around you to make sure you understand, okay, am I locking too early? Even though rates seem to be going up daily now, that might change in 30 days, and having somebody that can project, okay, is it a good time to lock, or we wait it out? Or we should lock and then release the lock and then relock. There's ways to get around it, and you want to make sure you're educated about what the pros and cons of each scenario are, so you know how to make the right moves and make an educated decision. We can tell you all about it, and then at the end of the day, it's your decision. So yes, there are lots of reasons for delay for closing. 60 to 90 days is like what usually contract terms say, so that you have a buffer time in there to make sure that you're getting to the closing table within the contract terms. Because if you don't meet the contract terms, they can cancel the deal and try and resell it, especially if the market's gotten better. That might be in their best interest. So you want to make sure you're moving quickly. Other questions? Give it another 30 seconds because people keep dropping in questions right before we're about to sign off. If I have a cosigner, does that change my down payment?
No, that's not going to change your down payment. You put in your down payment with your offer, and that is what is in your contract, and that is what you're contractually on the hook for. Can you put down more if you have a cosigner? Sure, of course you can. You can always put down more.
Down less. I think the thing is, like, they're trying, I feel like the root of this question is, can you put down less if you have a cosigner?
Okay.
That's how I read it a little bit.
Yeah, you're probably right. Not usually. The co-ops are usually going to require at least 20% down. There are some that do 10. Most condos are going to, so it depends on what you were already planning on putting down. And sometimes you can't change what's in the contract. And sometimes it's not going to necessarily change what you're able to do in a down payment if that's not set up in the financing terms. So
I think that the question is, so most places you want to put 20% down.
Yeah.
Most require 20% down. There are some places that will take 10% down if they have meet certain financial, they don't have as many restrictions as the 20% down places. But if you have seen any late night television shows that say 3% down, those scenarios are very unlikely here in New York City. There are some places outside, I would say, of New York City and Brooklyn that you can strategize for those situations, especially if you are part of programs. There are first-time home buyer programs, and I was hoping they would be expanding that. Who knows what it'll look like in the future to help incentivize people and get to that. Yeah, what are the incentives for first-time home buyers? There's a couple different programs, and I think if you want to get into it, Amy, but if you're a vet, or there's lots of programs that are available to help incentivize.
Yeah. Just speaking for my bank, we've got 6 different programs. So like we have a ton of first-time home buyer programs that are some are Fannie Mae based. One is Sonny Mae, which is the state of New York. We have a couple of our own like signature programs that we lend off of our portfolio. So there's a lot of, veterans, like there's a lot of different buckets that are available for first-time home buyers. A lot of them come with closing cost assistance, not all of them. They, by and large, they all come with a subsidized rate. You are either qualifying for those things because you make a certain level of income, or you are qualifying because of the geography of either the subject property or actually where you live. So I'm happy to have those discussions with anybody interested in those things. Just reach out to me directly and I can walk you through what the different programs are, different incentives that you might qualify for.
Great. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, sounds like it's there. And if you have any other questions, just reach out to us. We're happy to talk about it. What you're asking us last minute is like a lot of things to unpack here. We want to slowly go through all the details, but so reach out to us and we can talk in more in depth about all the things you just asked about.